I wish we could just skip all of this and like just start the conversation from right here, from what Izzy just said, and start recording now, and we'll do all the other parts later.
All right, there's two names that drive me crazy that they get added to this foul merchant list. At least if we go back in the DeLorean, back in the time machine to 2006, Dwayne Wade would have been thought of as a foul merchant. And it drives me absolutely up a wall. Like the idea that he was out there I don't consider somebody falling for a pump fake and then you drawing the foul as foul baiting. I believe that is ethical basketball. I believe the other stuff where, the Paul Pierce and like the rip through and the like put a dude in jail and then just put on the brakes. Like all that stuff is just taking advantage of BS. Like Jimmy Butler, the same thing. Jimmy Butler gets in the paint. He finds a body and he goes up for a shot. He's not necessarily just trying to draw the contact. It was one of the things I said about him when he first got to Miami that I was somewhat surprised about because you don't see people complaining when he goes to the line that much.
You're right. Dwayne Wade isn't a foul merchant. He's a foul mogul.
What?
He's a foul impresario. He's a merchant. Merchant's got one little shack in the market where it's like, oh, I'm selling my wares. Would you like to buy one of my fouls? No, he's like running a multi-billion-dollar conglomerate, moving fouls through the league, left and right. Dwayne Wade's not a foul merchant?
Please explain what about his game was just him drawing fouls with having no chance of scoring?
Who said anything had no chance of scoring? I think a lot of these guys have a chance of scoring. Here's the problem. You are ascribing a negative to foul merchant, to a guy who draws fouls, right? To draws fouls. You're ascribing as a negative behavior unless you did it in the pure way that Jimmy Butler does, which is punching someone in the face and then they get called for aggressively hitting his hand with their face, right? No, but Dwayne Wade absolutely did everything within his power to try to draw foul calls. He had no intention of making any of these shots. He was absolutely just trying to bait people into fouling him.
Pump fakes or
yes.
What else?
On pump fakes, yes.
Wait, isn't that one of the that's one of the clear, normal, ethical hooping? Like, if you get somebody in there on a pump fake, it's perfectly fine. And go look at the tape, how many of those damn shots he did make after getting fouled anyway, including game winners.
Oh, so basically like all the other players that we've been talking about, like Jalen Brunson,
No.
like Paul Pierce.
All right, let's back up, because we were so angry about this, we didn't even start the way we were supposed to, all right?
I was pretending.
Foul merchants, what are they? Glad you asked, Israel. All right, here's the thing. Back in our day, it took a while for slang or anything to sort of reach the mainstream, right? These days, social media, it's just like immediate. Things jump the shark immediately, right? Mm-hmm. So that I've been seeing this foul merchant phrase going around. I'm just like, all right, before we start labeling people, let's figure out what the hell a foul merchant actually is, because I think people would have varying definitions, a la you and me. All right, we're going to go to the record, Urban Dictionary. Okay, Urban Dictionary says a basketball player who relies entirely on free throws to score. That's what a foul merchant is. Known for running into defenders before falling down and begging for foul calls. Kind of sounds like LeBron. Here's where it sort of came to a head recently is because the guy who's getting the most for supposedly being a foul merchant is Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, okay? This was him getting chanted at from fans during a game.
Minnesota needed some size here for the final minute 40. Josh Minot.
And then after the game, by the way, Minnesota's coach, who won that game in a crazy comeback, still had a complaint about playing against SGA. Here's what Chris Finch had to say.
I mean, yeah. Well, it's so frustrating to play this team because they foul a ton. They really do. They foul all the time. And then, you can't really touch Shai.
All right, go for it.
So it sounds like he's not complaining about Shai drawing fouls. He's complaining about OKC's defense being pretty handsy and being very aggressive and, in essence, not getting called for fouls, to which I say, pot, meet, kettle. Because that was Minnesota last year. Look, I love Anthony Edwards. I think he's a great defensive player, but that dude is handsy as hell on every possession whenever he's locked in defensively.
But I'll take it further, though. Like Chris Finch's, I don't think SGA is a foul merchant. This is my distinction on this, okay? There are the Paul Pierces of the world who every time they run into a defender is going to throw his head back and try to draw a foul that way, right? We talked about the Chris Paul, like putting on the brakes when you got a guy in jail. They changed the whole rule for that because he was baiting, right, for fouls. SGA is different in that it's an unstoppable nature to his game, a lot like Dwayne Wade. No, ethical hoops, like the same way a pump fake and a pivot, he is so long and graceful and has so many moves and counter moves. You clearly foul him while trying to stop him from getting a shot. When you meet grace, that's him, with force, very often you're going to see the foul very clearly. When you meet force, maybe that's Anthony Edwards, with force, sometimes you miss some fouls. You don't get all the calls. That's why Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is doing nothing wrong in him earning his free throws, by the way, second in the league in attempts, first in the league in May.
I think what you describe applies to everybody who everyone's pissed off at.
No.
Jalen Brunson.
No.
It applies to Luka Doncic.
Go
It
back
applies
in
to
time.
James Harden.
James Harden. Come on, man.
No, man.
Look, it's different for me when you've got Jason Tatum with his long arms swinging through just so you don't get your hands on the ball. And hey, if you happen to foul him, you foul him. He was putting his arms in other guys' arms to try to get the foul every time.
This is exactly what Harden would do. He would go and he would show the ball. You're taught when you're driving not to expose the ball because then it can get stripped. But Harden, because his hands are so strong, he's able to extend the ball, not lose it, and as a result, get fouled doing that. He's baiting, yes. But if you don't swipe, he's making the layup.
But you know what's real basketball?
Hold on. Let me just say real quick. That's the difference to me. When you say Chris Paul stop in midcourt like this, and then yes, you were never in scoring position. If your defender hadn't run into you as a result of you stopping short, no, you would have just gotten into the front court and then basketball would have happened. With all these other guys we're talking about, Paul Pierce, Jalen Brunson, James Harden, Luka Doncic, all these guys, the difference is that they are going to score if you don't do this. And the contact is happening. This also isn't a Manu Ginobili situation where it's like, nobody touched you, and you do this because they got close to touching you. That to me is flopping, is foul merchant, is whatever. But when you are A, actually getting hit, which they all are, and B, if they didn't get hit, they would have scored on the play.
Again, I think you need to go back and watch because it wasn't just people reaching. It was him putting his arms where their arms were and then going through. The difference, if you're showing the ball, yeah, you're supposed. You know who shows the ball early all the damn time, every damn time? Kyrie Irving. Why? Because the defense thinks, oh, let me go block that, and then he moves it somewhere else and finishes, as opposed to, oh, look, there's an arm, whack, free throws.
Well, I mean, look, if he didn't move it, then he get fouled. But to me, it all comes down to this. It's like, can you defend? Can you be controlled in your defense? If you cannot, guess what? This guy's going to give you problems. And the fact that we are blaming people for learning how to play basketball really, really well is so preposterous.
Unless James Harden is by far the greatest player in the history of the game, the way people had to defend him because of all the foul baiting he was doing. Do you remember that? They were beside him. They were behind him. And it's like, he's not the greatest of all time. He just happened to be taking advantage of stupid rules that they have since, by the way, adjusted.
First of all, he was really freaking good.
Greatest of all time, an impossible scorer to stop. Nobody has an answer for this guy. Get out of here.
Well, I mean, look, the rules allowed for a lot of people, right? Like, would James Harden be able to do those things in a hand-checking league? A lot less, yes, but on the other hand, he's so physical because that's the other thing. All these guys are strong. Like, Shai might be the only guy who's like a slender guy on these list of names. Right?
By the way, where is James Harden right now in free throw attempts? Somebody look that up for me while Amin keeps talking. I called you Akeem for a second.
Yes, I know. When you think of clean, think of Akeem.
All right, so here are some folks that I guess the internet has deemed foul merchants.
Yeah, and by the way, again, my point isn't that these aren't people who actively seek to draw fouls. My point is there's nothing wrong with that. But go ahead.
Jalen Brunson.
Hell of a player. Love his game.
I do not think he's a foul merchant. I think he's got so much skill. Again, it's the pump fake, it's the misdirection, it's everything else.
He's putting his body into his defender in order to draw contact.
Well, I guess his own teammate says he leads with his head a lot, right?
Yeah, I mean,
but
it's a big head.
Those
too.
aren't, to me, I watch him play. Those aren't the fouls he's drawing necessarily. He's not drawing those BS fouls. What about Jimmy Butler?
I mean, Jimmy Butler, his is what we were talking about Anthony Edwards earlier, where it's forced, except Jimmy Butler initiates, right? He initiates contact, and he does it in a very physical way that throws defenders off balance and makes them have to scramble, and in the scramble, they have to foul him. Again, he is using his God-given advantage of being very strong and very deceptive with his pump fakes, but at the end of the day, he's initiating contact.
There's so many strong players in the NBA. Hands, arms, whatever. They don't do what James Harden. James Harden's not top of that list.
Harden is strong as What are you talking about?
I mean, there's so many players that could do that.
No, they're not. If they were, they would do it.
Okay. Jason Tatum.
I don't quite the opposite. People complain all the time that he doesn't get to the free throw line enough, that he doesn't do enough to get to the front of the rim. He takes too many jump shots.
He's kind of king of the rip through, it feels like. The new king of the rip.
But again, we changed the rip through rule, the Tim Duncan rule, right? Which was, it used to be do this, and then if your hand was in the cookie jar, go up, it's a shooting foul. And they changed that rule. They're like, it's side out of bounds unless you're in the penalty. So to me, okay, he draws a foul, so what?
By the way, James Harden 5th in attempts and makes per game.
Yeah, not bad for an old man.
I need you to look in the camera and tell me that Paul bleepin Pierce was not a foul merchant.
I would submit to you that Paul Pierce, what you're talking about, ethical
that
basketball.
Right
I'm looking at it. Paul Pierce, ethical basketball, he is the most ethical because it's all footwork. It's all sleight of hand. It's all fakery, right?
Sleight of hand is right. Fakery. I mean, how is it footwork when you just go, somebody gives you a slight bump and you act like you got shot in the chin?
Somebody give you a what?
A slight
bump.
What's the word that they're using? Marginal contact?
Let me look through the rule book here.
Marginal contact.
Not
the word marginal is in there now.
I don't think, first of all, I don't think most of Paul's stuff was
still looking at me. Look at the camera.
I don't think most of Paul's stuff was marginal contact. I think he was, again, creating the contact. Now, he wasn't creating it with force like Jimmy Butler, but he was still creating it. He was still baiting it. And ultimately, defenders were out of control trying to guard him. That's what all this comes down to, is defenders not being able to be in a controlled defensive stance and slide, right? Is that because they fell for some at some point, now they're trying to overcompensate, recover, and in that recovery, they have lost control of their bodies, and now that is when they have fallen into the trap.
But again, you're saying in some scenarios, in the ideal scenarios, I remember, and this could be eyes were lying, it was normal, great defense. I'm just trying to drive. Oh, no. And he's going to get a bunch of those calls. Those drove me crazy. SGA, absolutely perfectly fine with what he does. You calling Dwayne Wade something greater than a foul merchant, that might be worse than your PK Subban take.
Okay, first of all, my PK Subban take was
it did numbers,
flawless.
But it was kind of
it was flawless. Number two, Dwayne Wade, yes, again, because I don't see anything wrong with it, but he is the John D. Rockefeller of foul mercantilism.
Worst take of all time. Wild. He is so much.
Billionaire.
He's not even the
Carnegie.
If you were to split it up into positions, he's not even top of his own position.
Standard
ahead of James
Oil.
Harden. Get out of here. Let's
Vanderbilt.
I've been seeing these grids everywhere online. Take a look at this. It's basically left to right columns. Players are great, mid, average, or bad. And on the left, we'll have a column. It's oddball loves, oddball is divided by, or oddball hates. And we've got to come to sort of a conclusion on which players will fit in these boxes for us. I mean, we haven't talked about this at all. I haven't even tossed any names out to you. Mm-hmm. I know I've got a list. Should I just pick a category and start giving you some names and see if you agree, and then maybe something comes to mind for you, or how do you want to do this?
Yeah, no, you throw out a name and we'll go. Now, the way it works, loved by oddball, that means you and I have to unanimously both love this player.
Yes.
Hated by Oddball, we have to unanimously hate this player. And by the way, to explain to all you losers at home who take things literally, we don't hate them as people. Just like we don't like their game or whatever.
They also don't have to be bad players.
Yeah.
Like anybody who didn't, isn't a regular rotation player, didn't get 40 minutes a game, we could just call them a bad player.
I'll give you a great example. James Harden is a guy who's a great NBA player that Izzy does not apparently enjoy watching. That's what I learned during the
Not
break.
enough to hate. I wouldn't say hate. I also wouldn't pick too many current players but he would be on my short list. Let's start with the top left corner. A great player, loved by Oddball. We just had a discussion on him. I'm going to throw him out here, see if you love him as much as I do. Dwayne Wade.
I love Dwayne Wade, but I will see your Dwayne Wade and I raise you, and I'm going to go with someone active because no one's ever mad when you love someone. So Steph Curry.
Ooh,
everyone loves Steph Curry.
You know what? I was going to toss a T-Mac your way, but I think Steph Curry has to be the answer.
T-Mac's in there too, man. Look, there's a lot of names, but Steph Curry's the answer for right now.
Steph Curry's the answer. Okay.
This is probably if this were a density map, when the volume, this would probably be the most populated square. No.
Yeah. I would say so.
Or maybe average player. Man, there's a lot of.
Isn't that a lot of average players? Dude, people like, I love this average guy.
I know he's an all-star, but you don't seem to love him like I do. Jalen Williams is a guy where I'm like, I mean, in the grand scheme of the history of the NBA, he's probably closer to average, right?
I'll tell you, average player that I absolutely loved from college days through all his pro stops. Jason White Chocolate Williams. Never made an all-star game, but NBA champion. I'd call him average in terms of that, right? One of the most fun players ever to watch.
Yeah. You know what? Yeah, look, if the standard for greatness is Steph Curry and Dwayne Wade, then yes, I can agree that Jason Williams is average.
And is he loved by Oddball?
He's loved by Oddball.
All right,
Come on,
that's the pick. I think you got to go with Jay.
I still, look, the other day was the anniversary of him crossing up Gary Payton. And Gary
What did you do to celebrate?
Well, I tried to trip someone like Gary Payton did.
Do we want to move down, or we just want to keep going with love and see a bad player that we love? Finding bad players that you really like are tough.
No, it's not.
No?
No, it's not.
Okay.
I'll give you a great example. And a lot of people might have problems with him in this stage of his career as his post-playing career, but Sean Marks is an example of someone. Love Sean Marks. Wasn't a good NBA player, but he's
on my list.
There you go.
Because I covered him in Miami and he was the nicest human being on the bleeping planet.
Awesome. He is awesome.
We were going real light skinned with this list so far, but Sean Marks, we settled. I was going to go. Here's another one.
You guys love all the.
Here's another one that I thought could have been on the list, but Sean Marks jumps in.
Okay.
Gerald Green.
Gerald Green's not a bad player.
Oh,
dude.
come on.
Gerald Green, not a bad player.
But come on, he couldn't even stick anywhere. He couldn't even stick in a regular rotation for the most part.
He stuck around.
Look, this is not an insult. We're not trying. He's just not below average. No,
bad player is a guy who, no matter how long your career was, your minutes per game was low almost everywhere because you just weren't quite. Thanasis is a great example of a bad player. But I love Thanasis. Do you love Thanasis?
No.
You don't love Thanasis?
No, for comedic purposes, but not for basketball purposes.
Oh, is this for basketball purposes?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, all right. So basketball player just wasn't quite good enough, but I got one. You'll be like, I have no opinion. Phil Pressey.
Oh, okay.
That was Paul Pressey's son who played for the Celtics, who I saw as a high school sophomore, and I was like, that kid's gonna be a pro. And I was right, but he just wasn't that good of a pro.
What about Harold Miner? Was he bad?
Harold Miner? Yes, he was bad. You know what? Put Harold Miner on there.
Put Harold Miner on there instead of
Mac McClung is another
Marks, because every game Harold Miner played, I was like, man, I know this guy stinks, but I really hope he does that thing, which is just like whatever, some crazy dunk, and it's just I think we're gonna replace
some other crazy dunkers, but don't do much else.
No, Gerald Green.
Oh, okay, I see your point now.
All right, so we're going to hated by Oddball because divided is probably a more difficult one to fill, right?
Well, it's not. Divided is the one that we're going to be divided on, so that'll be easy.
Oh, okay, that's a good point.
So, I let me submit to you because I already know what name you want to put in. Great player, Oddball is divided.
Who?
The Truth.
Well, he's on my hated by Oddball list.
Well,
you love him?
I love Paul.
Put him on there then, because he is absolutely one of my most hated players.
I'm going to tell you why I love Paul. I love players who flourish almost completely off of IQ and skill. I get such a kick out of when this goes back to me being a video coordinator, and we make these training videos, right, to help young players learn how to play. And so it would be like the Sam Cassell post-up video for guards, right? The the Paul Pierce elbow, right? Because
what a basketball move.
The idea was we didn't want to show them like Dwight Howard rebounding because it's like he leaps 17 feet in the ground. Yeah. You want the guys who are doing it literally all off of technique and talent. And Paul was one of those guys.
He was talented. He just drove me crazy with all the trash talk. He thought he was the greatest. Like
his footwork was it was good.
That's why he's a great player.
His footwork was better than good.
Okay, great. That's why he's a great player.
There you go.
Great rhymes with hate. Let's go at an average player that Oddball is divided by. What do you think of Andre Miller? Do you think he's average? Do you love him? Do you hate him?
I think he's average, yes.
Okay, so he fits this box, but do you love him? Do you hate him? Do you feel any way about it?
Again, I just got done talking about how I love people who exceed because of their IQ and their skill and their adhesion to technique. Andre Miller fits that box, so I love him.
The reason I hated Andre Miller.
You hated Andre Miller?
The reason I hated Andre Miller is because of everything you said. He was frustrating to play against. You didn't think he was supposed to be that good. And yet he would absolutely dominate games sometimes. I don't hate him. I wouldn't hate him if he was on my team. I'd absolutely love him. But that's why I hated him. Playing against him was a nightmare. And it wasn't like things that you didn't think you weren't able to stop. Like you look at that guy's game, you're like, I should be able to stop that, and you can't.
You wanted a profile. This is what I'm learning here. You want to profile guys, and when they don't fit into your convenient little profile box, you end up not liking them.
Falsehoods.
Divided
bad player.
This is going to be the hardest category, by the way.
I mean, do you have any names? Because Matthew Dellavedova is a guy that people seem to like. Don't really like. Never really liked him. Chandler Parsons?
Chandler Parsons was better than bad. He wasn't a bad player.
Okay. Here's one. Chase Budinger in the light-skinned community.
Yo.
I was a fan. I was as a volleyball player and a volleyball fan, loved him. He probably jumped too straight up
because
volleyball player. But I really liked him, and obviously sort of, didn't really last that long and didn't really have that big of an impact. I could understand if you didn't like him.
Chase, I would say I'm lukewarm on Chase.
How about Jordan Poole?
Whoa! Unless you're with me.
No, I'm a fan.
Okay, put him right there.
All right, it's a bad player that I like. Yeah. I like watching him. I think he's a lot of fun. I think the kids love him. So
I can't stand watching him play. All
right, hated. We got to go through these quickly. Hated greats. What do you think of Dwight Howard?
No, I like Dwight Howard.
Okay, Stockton or Malone.
Yeah.
What about the combo of both Stockton and Malone?
Stockton and Malone. I'm with you.
Let's put Stockton and Malone there because here's my test for that one. Uh-huh. Every team after they beat the Lakers that Michael Jordan played against, I wanted them to win, except for the Utah Jazz.
Yeah.
I was like, let's go Seattle. Oh, shit. Let's go Portland. Oh, Jazz. Can't do it.
Yeah,
I can't do it.
I kind of with you on that one. I think Stockton and Malone together.
The pairing. Yep. The pairing only. All right. Hated and average.
I think we go down the list. Howard Isley.
Similar skin tone. Allen Houston.
What? Hell no, man. Not H2O.
I mean, he hit the one shot against the Heat. That's why I hate him. Okay, how about Evan Turner?
No, I like Evan Turner, man.
Oh, that game was so frustrating. JJ Redick.
So this is a great example of not hated as a person because I really, really like JJ Redick.
Same.
And I respect
just
him.
Not the coach character that he's playing. Everything else about him.
I like JJ Redick. I'm not talking about Coach Redick.
Okay.
But watching him play, I rooted against him every moment of his life. Here's another one. Dan Marley. Again, a personal friend.
Thunder.
I hated Dan Marley.
Oh, no.
I
played for the Heat. Come on.
I hated that. You know what? I used to think he was a foul merchant on the other end, just handing out fouls. And then years later, I befriended him. He's a great guy. He's awesome. And we played pickup ball. And guess what? He is a foul merchant. He fouls the out of me every single time.
We're taking JJ Redick there. Average player hated by Oddball. Last one is bad player hated by Oddball. Shabazz Napier might be the worst person, might be my most hated player because they tricked the Heat into drafting him. LeBron tricked the Heat into drafting him. You know who they could have had instead of Shabazz Napier?
Anybody else?
Greatest player of all time, Nikola Jokic, got drafted after him. Not that the Heat would have drafted him, but they could have if they weren't so damn locked in on Shabazz Napier.
I would say then put LeBron on that list then.
He's not a bad player.
No, I'm not going to go Shabazz Napier. I'm going to go with Austin Rivers.
Ooh, I don't hate Austin Rivers.
You don't?
No.
You enjoyed watching Austin Rivers?
Yeah, I'd rather put Jimmer Fredette on the list.
Jimmer.